Picture this. You're in a packed courtroom. The air is thick with tension. The defense attorney, a real smooth talker, is absolutely crushing it. He's dismantling the prosecution's case piece by piece. You can feel the jury leaning his way. The defendant, a young man accused of a serious crime, looks like he's about to walk free. It feels like the closing scene of a legal drama where justice is about to be served. And then, in a split second, everything goes sideways. What happens when a slam-dunk case implodes right before your eyes? Today, we're rediving into some of the most jaw-dropping moments in legal history where the defense snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. These are stories that prove just how unpredictable a courtroom can be, where one wrong move, one unexpected word, can change everything. Stick around, because you won't believe how these cases turned on a dime. Let's start with a classic case that's become a legend in law schools. It's the story of a man on trial for murder. The evidence against him was purely circumstantial. The prosecution had no weapon, no witnesses to the act itself, and a weak motive. The defense lawyer, confident and theatrical, was putting on a masterclass. He had the jury in the palm of his hand. For his grand finale, he decided to pull off a dramatic stunt. He turned to the jury and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to believe my client is guilty. But they haven't produced the victim. In fact, I have a surprise for you all." He then pointed to the courtroom doors and declared in just a few moments, the man they claim is deceased will walk right through those doors. Every single person in the courtroom, from the judge to the reporters, whipped their heads around to look at the entrance. The tension was unbearable. A few seconds passed, then a minute, nothing happened. The doors remained shut. The lawyer, with a smug grin, let the silence hang in the air before saying, "See, you all looked. That means you had a shadow of a doubt in your minds that the victim might still be alive. And if you have doubt, you must acquit." He thought he'd won. It was a brilliant, theatrical move. The prosecutor just stood there looking stunned. But then, she slowly rose to her feet for her rebuttal. She looked at the jury and said calmly, "That was a clever trick. It's true, most of you did look towards the door. But I happened to be watching the one person who didn't look. The one person in this room who knew for an absolute fact that the victim wouldn't be walking through that door." She then turned and pointed directly at the defendant. He had been staring straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't turned his head, because he knew the victim was gone. The jury's faces changed instantly. The smug confidence on the defendant's face evaporated. In that single moment, the entire case flipped. The lawyer's own clever trick had just sealed his client's fate. The jury came back with a guilty verdict in record time. Now let's talk about a case where the defendant himself was the architect of his own downfall. This guy was on trial for armed robbery. The main evidence was a grainy security camera video showing a masked man robbing a convenience store. Quality was poor and you couldn't see the robber's face clearly. The defense's strategy was simple: reasonable doubt. They argued that the man in the video could be anyone. The prosecution's key witness was the store clerk who was working that night. She was on the stand, and the defense attorney was cross-examining her. He asked, "You've testified that you were terrified. The robber had a gun pointed at you. Is it fair to say your attention was mostly on the weapon?" She agreed. He continued, "So, with the mask, the poor lighting, the stress of the situation, you can't be 100% certain that my client is the man who robbed you, can you?" She hesitated, then admitted she couldn't be absolutely certain. It was a major win for the defense. You could feel the momentum shift. The defendant, sitting next to his lawyer, was starting to look relieved. The prosecutor then got up for redirect. She walked towards the witness and asked a few simple questions to re-establish her credibility. Then, she turned her attention back to the defendant. She said, "Your Honor, I have one more question. Not for the witness, but for the defendant. This is highly unusual, but the judge allowed it." She looked the defendant dead in the eye and asked, "Sir, when you robbed the store, did you use your left hand or your right hand to hold the gun?" The defense lawyer immediately shot up, shouting objection. "My client doesn't have to answer that," but it was too late. The defendant, in a moment of sheer panic and stupidity, blurted out, "I didn't have a gun." Silence. Absolute, dead silence in the courtroom. Everyone just stared at him. He had just admitted to being there. The robbery was no longer in question. Only the presence of a gun was. He essentially confessed on the stand to the core of the crime, trying to argue a lesser detail. His own lawyer just slumped into his chair, head in his hands. He'd just snatched a victory from the jaws of defeat and thrown it all away with a single panicked sentence. It is a perfect example of how the pressure of a trial can make people do incredibly self-destructive things. Sometimes it's not the lawyers or the defendants who cause the implosion, but an unexpected witness. There was a case involving a complex white-collar fraud scheme. The main defendant was a CEO, a polished and respected figure in the community. His defense team portrayed him as an unwitting victim, someone who had no idea his subordinates were cooking the books. They argued he was too busy with big-picture strategy to be involved in the day-to-day accounting. To support this, they called a character witness to the stand, his longtime personal assistant. She was meant to be the final, glowing testament to his unimpeachable character. She was supposed to talk about his integrity, his charity work, and how he was a pillar of the community. And at first, she did. She spoke glowingly about him, painting a picture of a kind, honest, and perhaps slightly naive boss. The defense attorney was beaming. This was going perfectly. Then, the prosecutor got up for cross-examination. He started gently. He worked closely with Mr. Smith for over a decade, is that right? Yes, she said. So you knew his habits, his routines pretty well? Yes, better than anyone, she replied proudly. The prosecutor then picked up a thick binder of documents. I have here the financial records for the company's offshore accounts, the ones used in the fraud. The transactions are all authorized by a specific code, Project Nightingale. Did Mr. Smith ever mention Project Nightingale to you? The assistant paused. Not by that name, she said carefully. The prosecutor pressed on. But he did have special projects, ones he handled personally and didn't want recorded in the usual company calendar, right? She nodded. Yes, he called them his special projects. The prosecutor then asked the killer question. And what did he tell you to do when he was working on these special projects? The assistant took a deep breath and, looking straight at her boss, said, He told me that whenever I saw the Project Nightingale files on his desk, I was to shred them immediately after he left the office for the day. The courtroom erupted. The CEO's face went white as a sheet. His own loyal assistant, the star witness for his character, had just directly linked him to the cover-up. She thought she was just describing her duties. But in doing so, she placed the shredder, figuratively and literally, in his hands. The defense's entire strategy crumbled in an instant. These stories are more than just courtroom drama. They're powerful lessons in human psychology and the unpredictability of life. They show how, under pressure, even the most carefully constructed plans can fall apart. A clever trick backfires. A panicked defendant blurts out a confession. A loyal witness tells a little too much of the truth. It reminds us that for all the strategy and preparation, the human element is always the wild card. The next time you watch a legal drama and think the ending is too crazy to be true, remember these cases. The truth can be, and often is, stranger than fiction. What's the most shocking courtroom twist you've ever heard of? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into legal blunders, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.